It is a terrible thing to look back across 60 years and pinpoint the exact moment your life could have been saved, if only you hadn't been so foolish as to laugh. Hello? My name is Virginia, and I am 83 years old now. I live in a quiet little cottage, and the loudest sound most days is the kettle whistling or the chatter of the goldfinches at the feeder. I have lived a long life, a full life, but it was also a life cleaved in two. There was the life before the phone call and the life after. And then, much later, the life I had to build from the rubble of the first two. We think, when we are young, that we are invincible. We mistake confidence for wisdom. We mistake charm for character. In the spring of 1963, I was 21 years old, and I was absolutely, devastatingly, and stupidly in love. His name was Patrick. I find it difficult, even now, to describe Patrick in a way that makes sense of what followed. If I told you he was a monster, it would be too simple. Monsters are easy to recognize. They have claws and fangs and live in the dark. Patrick lived in the light. He was the center of every room, the easy laugh, the reassuring hand on your shoulder. He wasn't the kind of man who had shadows. He was the kind of man who, I thought, chased them away. I met him at a church social. It sounds dreadfully old-fashioned now, doesn't it? But in our small town, it was the only way. I was there with my parents, feeling awkward and oversized in a dress I didn't like. He walked in, and the atmosphere of the entire room changed. He wasn't just handsome, he was complete. He moved with a certainty that I, in my entire life, had never felt. He singled me out. Me, Virginia, the girl who always felt like she was standing just outside the circle of light. He brought me a cup of watery punch and spoke to me as if I were the only person there. He asked about my thoughts on books, on the changing seasons, on my hopes. He listened, or at least he appeared to listen. That was his greatest skill. He made you feel seen. We courted for 6 months. It was a whirlwind that, in my memory, feels like a blurry, sun-drenched film reel. He was everything my parents approved of. He was establishing himself in business, he was polite, he was ambitious, and he was, above all, devoted to me. Or so I believed. He bought me flowers. He remembered the smallest details I told him. He spoke of a future, our future, with such definitive clarity that I simply slotted myself into the beautiful picture he was painting. Of course, I knew he had been married before. It was not a secret, though it was certainly spoken of in hushed tones. This was the early 60s, after all, and divorce was still a stain, a quiet failure. Patrick naturally had a perfectly crafted story for it. Her name was Cheryl, he told me one evening, his voice adopting a tone of noble tragedy. We were sitting in his car, parked overlook, a place where young couples went. I tried, Virginia. Lord, how I tried. But she wasn't well, in her mind. He would sigh, running a hand through his hair. She was prone to hysterics, accusations. She imagined things. It became impossible, dangerous even. I had to leave for my own sanity. He looked at me then, his expression so open and vulnerable. I've been so afraid to trust again, until you. You are so calm, so steady. You're like solid ground beneath my feet, Virginia. And I believed him. Every single word. Why wouldn't I? Here was this wonderful man, wounded by a difficult, unstable woman. I didn't just feel love for him. I felt protective. I would be the one to heal him. I would be the calm, steady ground he deserved. I, in my youthful arrogance, would be the woman who was not Cheryl. We were married 3 months later, in a simple ceremony. My parents were thrilled. His, who lived out of state, sent a polite card. We moved into a charming little house on the edge of town, a house he had secured. He called it our new beginning. And that is when the phone call came. It was a Tuesday. I remember that. It was 3 weeks to the day since our wedding. I was still floating on a cloud of domestic bliss, humming along to the radio as I unwrapped new dishware from its tissue paper. Patrick was at work, of course. He worked long hours, building his business, he said. The telephone rang, its shrill noise cutting through the quiet afternoon. I picked it up, expecting my mother. "Hello? This is the residence." There was a pause on the other end, just the sound of static and shallow breathing. "Hello?" I said again, annoyed. "Is this Virginia?" The voice was a woman's. It was thin, frayed, like a rope stretched too taut. "Yes, it is. Who is this?" Another pause. This is Cheryl, Patrick's—" I was Patrick's wife. My blood went cold. Not from fear, but from a sudden sharp spike of indignation. How dare she? How dare this unstable, hysterical woman call my house? All of Patrick's warnings, all of his sad confessions about her, solidified in my mind. "I think you should hang up," I said, my voice as cold and hard as I could make it. "There is nothing for you to say to me." "No, please." The desperation in her voice was startling. It was so raw, it almost broke through my defenses. "Please, you don't understand. You don't know him. You don't know what he is." "I know that you are the woman who tried to ruin him," I said, gripping the receiver. "I know that you are unwell, and I'm going to hang up now." "He's lying to you," she almost shrieked, and I flinched, pulling the phone away from my ear slightly. "Whatever he told you about me, it's a lie. He's a liar. He's a— She seemed to be sobbing, searching for a word. "He's a thief." "Goodbye, Cheryl," I said, my patience gone. "Wait, you're in that house, aren't you? The one on Elm Creek?" "Oh, God." Her voice dropped to a terrified whisper. "Virginia, listen to me. I'm telling you, run. Just run. Get out of that house before it's too late. Get out before he—" And that's when I did it. I laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was a laugh of pure, unadulterated contempt. It was the laugh of a 21-year-old girl who believed she had the world by the tail, the laugh of a girl who had won the prize. Who was I to listen to this pathetic, desperate creature? I had Patrick. I had the beautiful house. I had the future. She had nothing. "You're pathetic," I said, the laughter still in my voice, and I hung up the phone. I stood there for a moment, my heart hammering with adrenaline and anger. The nerve of that woman! To call me, to try and poison me with her jealousy. Run, I thought? Run from what? From my new life? From the man who adored me? I busied myself with the dishes again, the clinking of the plates a comfort. I resolved, right then, not to even tell Patrick. Why upset him? Why drag him back into the misery she had clearly caused him? It was my job, as his wife, to protect him from this, to be his solid ground. This call, this woman, she was nothing, a ghost, an echo from a life that was over. That evening, when Patrick came home, he was his usual self. He kissed me, asked about my day, and complimented the dinner I'd made. He was tired, he said, but in a good way. Things were moving at the office, big things. "Did anything interesting happen to you today, my love?" he asked, pouring himself a glass of water. I looked at him, so strong and steady. "No, darling," I said, smiling. "Nothing at all." In the weeks that followed, the call faded from my memory. It was easy to let it go. Life with Patrick was consuming. He was attentive, incredibly so. At first I found it romantic. He liked to know where I was going. "Just so I don't worry, darling. The world is a dangerous place." He would offer to run errands for me, to pick up the groceries, so I didn't have to go out. "You've had a long day. Let me take care of it." He didn't much care for my old friends, or even my family. "Your mother seems to put a lot of pressure on you, Virginia. Does that really make you happy, visiting her? Or, that friend of yours, she seems so flighty. I worry she's a bad influence." He was subtle. It wasn't a demand. it was always couched in concern. Concern for my well-being, my happiness, my safety, and I, so eager to be the perfect supportive wife, agreed. I saw my friends less. I spoke to my mother only when he wasn't home, and our conversations became shorter. My world, which had once been expansive, began to shrink, its borders drawing closer and closer until the only person left inside them was Patrick and the money. It was, I assured myself, normal for the time. The husband handled the finances. I had no head for numbers, I'd tell myself. Patrick was the expert. "You don't need to worry your pretty little head about bills, Virginia," he'd say, patting my hand. "I've set up an allowance for you, for the house, and for your little things. Just give me the receipts, and I'll handle the rest." An allowance. It sounded so generous. I had a little envelope of cash each week. I never saw a bank statement. I never saw a bill. When I asked, just once, if we should be saving more, his face darkened for just a second. "Are you questioning me, Virginia? After all I'm doing to build us a life?" No, of course not, Patrick. I'm the man of this house. I provide. You trust me, don't you?" "Of course I trust you," I said, rushing to reassure him, ashamed of my question. "Good. Then let's not have this conversation again. It upsets me." It was a small thing. A crack so tiny you couldn't see it unless you were looking, and I was determined not to look. I was too busy being happy. I was too busy proving to the ghost of Cheryl that I was the perfect wife, the one who trusted, the one who understood him. The first month passed, then the second. We were approaching our 3-month anniversary. I had planned a special dinner. I felt smug. I had never been happier. My life was perfect. Patrick was perfect. The phone call from that hysterical woman was a distant, laughable memory. A joke. Run before it's too late. What a fool she was. I had my perfect husband, my perfect home, and the perfect future. I had laughed at the warning, and for 92 days I believed I was the luckiest woman alive. 93 days. I was standing in the kitchen of our perfect little house, the one on Elm Creek. The scent of a roasting chicken filled the air, a scent I associated with comfort, with family. I had spent all afternoon preparing this meal. It was, in my mind, a celebration. 3 months of marriage, 3 months of being Mrs. Patrick. I had put on my favorite dress, the one he said made me look sensible. I had even used a little bit of my allowance to buy a bottle of sparkling grape juice, a silly, celebratory extravagance. I hummed as I basted the chicken. I felt a deep, profound sense of pity for that poor, frantic woman who had called me. Cheryl. What a sad life she must lead, to be so consumed by jealousy. I, on the other hand, was thriving. Patrick was a good husband, a bit particular perhaps. He liked the house kept a certain way. He preferred I didn't tire myself with unnecessary social visits. He worried about the telephone bill, so I kept my calls with my mother brief. These were not flaws. They were proof of his serious-mindedness, his desire to build a stable future. He was a man who took charge, and I was a woman who was happy to be taken care of. The clock on the wall ticked. 6 o'clock. He was usually home by 5:30. I checked the potatoes. I smoothed my dress. 6:30. The chicken was done. I moved it to a platter and covered it, setting it on the stove to keep warm. A flicker of annoyance, tiny and sharp, pricked at me. I had timed everything perfectly. 7 o'clock. The potatoes were getting mushy. The gravy was forming a skin. The house, which had felt so cozy, now felt silent and overly warm. I walked to the front window, parting the curtains to look at the dark, empty driveway. Where was he? He was always on time. His punctuality was one of the things I admired most. 7:30. I was no longer humming. I was pacing. The little bubble of my perfect evening had burst. Had there been an accident? Should I call someone? But who? I realized with a sudden hollow jolt that I did not have the phone number for his office. I had never needed it. He always called me. Just as the first real tendril of panic began to grip me, headlights swept across the living room wall. A moment later, I heard his key in the lock. I rushed to the door, my speech prepared. "Oh, Patrick, I was so worried. Are you all right?" He walked in, setting his briefcase down with a heavy sigh. He didn't look at me. He was unbuttoning his coat, his expression closed and tight. "Patrick? Darling, is something wrong?" "I'm fine, Virginia," he said, his voice flat. He walked past me toward the kitchen. "What's that smell? You've burned something." "No, I followed him, feeling wrong-footed. "It's the roast chicken. For our anniversary. 3 months." I tried to sound cheerful, but my voice wavered. He looked at the carefully set table, the 2 glasses, the sparkling juice. He looked at the platter of food on the stove. He didn't look impressed. He looked burdened. "An anniversary," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Virginia, I don't have time for this tonight." "Time for dinner?" "I've had an incredibly difficult day. The last thing I need is this production. We can't afford this kind of thing." "Afford it?" I was confused. "It's just a chicken, Patrick, and juice. I bought it with my allowance." "The allowance," he said, turning to face me. The light in the kitchen was harsh, and for the first time I saw that he wasn't just tired, he was angry. "The allowance, which you seem to think is for frivolous things, for performances." "It was meant to be nice," I said, my voice shrinking. I thought you'd be pleased." "Pleased?" He let out a short, sharp laugh that was nothing like the easy, charming laugh I knew. "What would please me, Virginia, is if you understood the pressure I am under, the seriousness of our situation. I am out there every single day working to keep a roof over our heads, and I come home to this, to childish games." "I don't understand," I whispered. My perfect evening was dissolving into something ugly and confusing. "What's wrong? What situation?" "The finances, Virginia, the bills, things are complicated. I've been protecting you from it." "I've been handling it all, so you don't have to worry." He sat down at the table, not in his assigned seat, but in the other one, my seat. He motioned to the food. "I suppose we should eat, since you went to all this trouble." We ate in near silence. The chicken was dry. The potatoes were a paste. I felt a knot in my stomach that had nothing to do with food. The man across from me was a stranger, this cold, sharp, dismissive person. "Patrick," I tried again, my voice trembling slightly. "You can talk to me. We're married. If there's trouble with money, I should know. I can help. I can get a job, or I can spend less." He put his fork down with a loud clack. "A job? Don't be ridiculous. My wife does not work, and you will spend less. That allowance?" He said the word like it was a dirty secret. "We're going to have to reevaluate. You'll need to write down everything you spend, every penny. I need to see where the money is going." "Write it down?" "A ledger. A little book. You'll keep it in the kitchen drawer. Before you get your money for the week, I will review the previous week's book. Is that clear?" It was humiliating. It was the tone he was using, the tone one might use for a child or for someone one did not trust. "But, Patrick, it's just a few dollars for groceries." "It's not just a few dollars, Virginia. It's waste. It's frivolous. It's exactly the kind of thing that—" He stopped, pinching the bridge of his nose. "The kind of thing what?" He looked at me, his eyes cold and assessing. "It's the kind of thing Cheryl used to do. She never understood the value of $1. She was always dramatic, always making special dinners we couldn't afford, always demanding things." The blood drained from my face. It was the first time he had said her name since we were married, and he had just compared me to her. I'm not Cheryl, I said. Then stop acting like her, he snapped. Stop being so hysterical. There it was, the word he had used to define her, the word that had made me pity him. Hysterical. I went silent. I had no defense against that. To argue, to cry, to protest, it would all be proof. It would make me her. I cleared the plates without another word, my hands shaking. He went to his study. I cleaned the kitchen, scrubbing the roasting pan with furious, silent tears. When I went to the bedroom, he was already in bed, his back to my side, pretending to be asleep. I lay down in the dark, rigid, staring at the ceiling, feeling an icy coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature, the laughter, my laughter, on the phone. Run before it's too late. I pushed the thought away. It was a bad night. He was stressed. That was all. I was his wife. I was his calm, steady ground. I would be better. I would be more frugal. I would not be hysterical. The next few weeks were different. The facade of our newlywed bliss was gone, replaced by a tense, brittle quiet. Patrick was no longer the charming man who listened to my thoughts. He was the provider, and I was a line item in his budget. I kept the little ledger. It was a small, spiral-bound notebook. Bread, 30 cents. Milk, 20 cents. Soap, 15 cents. Every Saturday, he would sit at the kitchen table and review it, a red pen in his hand, like a school teacher. Why this brand of soap, Virginia? The store brand is 2 cents cheaper. It's the one my mother always used. A sentimental reason to waste money. Don't buy it again. My world shrank further. The allowance, which had been small, was now minuscule, and I had to account for every single cent. I stopped calling my mother. Even a short call was a frivolous expense. I felt trapped. The walls of the lovely little house felt like they were pressing in on me. One afternoon, I was cleaning, trying to make everything perfect, to prove I was not a waste, not frivolous. I was dusting his study, a room I usually avoided. He had a large, heavy desk, and he was very particular about his papers. Don't ever touch my desk, Virginia. It's organized for my work. But a piece of paper had fallen behind it. I knelt to retrieve it, and as I did, my hand brushed against the side of the desk, the part that faced the wall. I felt a piece of tape. Curious, I angled my head. Taped to the back of the desk, just out of sight, was a small silver key. My heart began to hammer. This was his desk, his private space. I should stand up. I should get the paper and leave. But I didn't. I looked at the key. It was a simple key, the kind used for a small lock. I looked at the desk. The top drawers were unlocked, but the bottom right drawer, that one had a little keyhole. I had never even noticed it before. It was the one drawer he always kept locked. I told myself I was being foolish. I was being hysterical. This was his private business. I was his wife, the one who trusted him. But the word, thief. Cheryl's voice, raw with desperation. He's a thief. I thought she meant he had stolen her heart, or her peace. But what if she meant money? Patrick was at the office. He wouldn't be home for hours. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely function. I peeled the key from the back of the desk. The tape was old, but sticky. I knelt in front of the drawer. I put the key in the lock. It fit. I turned it. A small, quiet click. I stared at the drawer handle for a good 30 seconds. This was the line. I knew it. If I opened this drawer, I was no longer the trusting, perfect wife. I was someone else. I was the kind of woman who snooped, the kind of woman who didn't trust her husband. I was, perhaps, becoming Cheryl. I didn't care. I pulled the drawer open. It was not full of papers. It was not full of cash. It was organized. There were 3 items inside. The first was a bank book, a passbook, not from the local bank where we had our household account. This was from a large, important-looking bank in the city. I opened it. The name on the account was just Patrick. The balance made me gasp. It was thousands and thousands of dollars, more money than I had ever seen in my life. A fortune. Where had this come from? If he had this, why was he going over my grocery list with a red pen? Why was he protecting me from a difficult situation? Then I saw the second item. It was another book, a ledger. But not like my little spiral notebook. This was a thick, leather-bound volume. I opened it to the last used page. It was a list of transactions, payments, huge sums. March 1st, April 1st, May 1st. Regular as clockwork. But it wasn't the what that froze my blood. It was the who. The payments were being made to a holding company, but the name next to it, in parentheses, was a name I recognized. It was the name of the man who had sold Patrick our house. Or so I thought. My head was spinning. What did this mean? And then I saw the third item at the bottom of the drawer. It was a simple manila folder. It was thin. There was only one document inside. I pulled it out. My hands were so numb I could barely feel the paper. It was a legal document. It looked official. I read the header. Final decree of divorce. It was the divorce decree between Patrick and Cheryl. I skimmed the dry legal language, assets, liabilities, division of property. My eyes scanned the page, looking for, I didn't know what, and then I found it. A clause, a paragraph, about the house on Elm Creek. This house. The house, it stated, was awarded to Cheryl as part of the settlement. It was her sole and separate property. Patrick was to have no claim to it. I read the sentence again and again. It didn't make sense. We were living in her house. I looked at the date on the document. The divorce was finalized 6 months before Patrick and I had even met. I thought back to the ledger, the payments, the man's name. It wasn't the man who sold us the house. It was the man who owned the bank that held the mortgage. A mortgage. On a house. That belonged to Cheryl. He hadn't bought this house for us. He hadn't bought it at all. Run. Get out of that house before it's too late. She wasn't warning me about the house. She was warning me about her house. The room was tilting. I looked at the bank book with its thousands of dollars. I looked at the ledger. I looked at the divorce decree. He's a thief. He wasn't paying the mortgage. The payments in the ledger, they were to someone else. He was bleeding that city bank account dry. And the house, her house. He wasn't protecting me from our financial situation. He was the cause of it. He was, it seemed, stealing. He was stealing from his ex-wife. He was hiding money. And he had brought me, his new, trusting, stupid wife, to live in the scene of the crime. The front door slammed shut. "Virginia, I'm home early." My heart stopped. I was on the floor of his study, the drawer open, the bank book in my lap, and the divorce decree in my hand. The sound of my own heartbeat was so loud it was like a drum in the tiny, silent study. I was a trapped animal. I was a child caught in a terrible adult transgression. My lungs had ceased to work. I could not draw a breath. I could only stare, frozen on the floor, at the divorce decree in my hand. I heard his footsteps on the hardwood floor of the hallway. They were not rushed. They were steady. He was not coming to find me. He was coming to the study, where he had heard a noise, or perhaps simply felt my intrusion. He appeared in the doorway. His expression was not the cheerful one I had heard in the hall. The "I'm home early" was gone, replaced by a still, quiet watchfulness. His eyes did not go to me, not at first. They went to the open desk drawer, to the silver key still dangling from the lock. to the leather ledger and the city bank book sitting on the carpet beside me. And then his eyes moved to me, to my face, and finally to the single piece of paper I was clutching in my right hand. He did not speak. He did not have to. The air in the room became solid, heavy, and cold. Patrick, my voice was not a voice. It was a croak, a dry rustle of leaves. I was dusting. A paper, and the key. I found. The lie died in my throat. It was a child's lie, transparent and pathetic. He took one step into the room, then another. He moved with a terrifying deliberation. He was not angry. He was not shocked. He was something else, something I had no name for. He stopped, standing directly over me. I was a small, crumpled thing at his feet. He was a mountain. "Give me the papers," he said. His voice was not loud. It was soft. It was the softest, most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "Patrick, I don't—" "Now, Virginia." My hands were shaking so violently that the paper rattled. I could not make my fingers let go. It was as if my body understood, before my mind did, that this paper was the only piece of truth I had. He sighed, a small, impatient sound. He bent down, not to help me, but to take. He did not grab. He plucked. He plucked the bank book from the carpet. He plucked the ledger, and then his fingers closed around the divorce decree I was holding. He easily, effortlessly pulled it from my grasp. I was left holding nothing. He stood up, straightening to his full height, and began to read. He looked at the bank book. He looked at the ledger. He looked at the decree. His face was a mask of concentration, as if he were merely reviewing a report from the office. "You've been busy," he said, still not looking at me. I struggled to my feet. I felt unmoored. I needed to stand. I could not be on the floor for this. "Patrick, please, tell me, what is this?" I gestured to the papers. "I don't understand. This paper, it says this house. It says it's her house. It's Cheryl's house." He finally looked at me, and the mask was gone. The Patrick I knew, the charming, kind, steady man, was not there. In his place was a stranger. His eyes were not warm. They were cold, flat, and full of a breathtaking contempt. "You're a fool," he said. I reeled back as if he had struck me. "You're a fool, Virginia, a snooping, idiotic little fool. What did you think you would find? Love letters?" I thought, the money, you said we had no money." My voice was trembling. "But that book, there are thousands of dollars. And this house, he said, walking around the desk and sitting in his chair, "is a complication." He tapped the decree. This was a mistake, a legal error. That woman," he spat the word, "thought she could take everything from me. She thought she could take my money, my home, my reputation. But the court, he laughed. That same short, sharp laugh from the night of our ruined anniversary dinner. "The court is run by idiots. She charmed them. She played the victim. She's good at that. She's hysterical, I told you. She's a liar." "She called me," I whispered. The confession was out before I could stop it. His head snapped up. The coldness in his eyes turned into a burning, white-hot fire. "What?" Just after we were married. She called. She told me to run. She said you were a thief." "And what did you say, Virginia?" He leaned forward, his voice a predator's whisper. My throat was closing. I laughed. I laughed at her. I told her she was pathetic, and I hung up. The rage in his face vanished. It was replaced by something far worse, a slow, calculating smile. It was the most horrible thing I had ever seen. "Good," he said. "Good girl. You see? You knew, even then. You knew she was nothing, and you were right. She is pathetic. He leaned back in his chair, suddenly relaxed. He was in control again. He had me. That's all this is, he said, gesturing to the papers, as if it were all a minor inconvenience. I am undoing a wrong. I am taking back what is mine. That money? He tapped the bank book. That is my money, money I earned, money she tried to steal. And this house, he tapped the decree. She doesn't deserve it. She never did. But Patrick, we're living in it. If it's hers, isn't that illegal? It's illegal, he mocked, for you to go through my private desk. It's illegal for a wife to betray her husband's trust. You are just like her. The words hit me again. Just like her. No. Yes, snooping, crying, hysterical. You can't just be happy. You can't just trust me. You have to dig. You have to ruin things. He stood up and walked toward me. I backed away until my back hit the bookshelf. I was trapped. He put one hand on the shelf next to my head. He was not touching me. He didn't have to. I was pinned by his presence. Listen to me, Virginia, he said, his voice low and reasonable, which was somehow more frightening than the anger. You have a choice. Right now. A choice? You can be the trusting wife, the wife I thought I married, the wife who understands, the wife who supports her husband, who is building a future for them, the wife who keeps her mouth shut. He paused. Or, you can be Cheryl. I stared at him, uncomprehending. What? What does that mean? It means, he said, that Cheryl is about to find herself in a great deal of trouble. You see that house? The one she owns? It has a very large mortgage on it. A mortgage that, it seems, hasn't been paid in a very, very long time. The bank is concerned. They are looking for her. But she's gone. Disappeared. No one knows where she is. You told me she was unstable, I whispered. She is. So unstable that she ran off, abandoned her property, abandoned her responsibilities. I was a piece of ice. I was understanding. But the payments in the ledger. My business, he snapped. Payments, not to the bank, not for her. My investments, the money I've been saving, the money I've been hiding from everyone. From her, from the banks, from the government, and from you. Because you, my dear, are not good with money. You are frivolous. The roast chicken. The sparkling juice. The 2 cents for the soap. It was all a lie, a game, a test. He was not poor. He was rich. And he was letting this house, her house, fall into ruin. The bank, I said, my mind working slowly, piecing together the shards of glass. The bank will repossess the house from her. Exactly, he said, as if I were a clever student. They will take the house. It will ruin her. Her name, her credit, everything. She will have nothing. She will be, officially, the failure I always said she was. And I will have my money, safe and sound. And we will move on. Move on? Move on. Where? Somewhere new. Somewhere far away from here. We will start again. With my money. And me? The question was a whisper. And you, if you are a good wife, if you are my calm, steady wife, if you forget what you saw here tonight. He looked at me. Can you do that, Virginia? Can you forget? Run. Get out of that house before it's too late. Cheryl's warning hadn't been about him stealing from me. It hadn't been about his temper. It had been about this criminal plot, this cold, rotten revenge. She wasn't hysterical. She was terrified. She wasn't jealous. She was trying to save me. And I had laughed. I had hung up. I had called her pathetic. "Patrick," I said, and I was shocked to hear my own voice, suddenly clear. You are a thief. She was right. You are. Stealing this house from her. His face changed. The smile vanished. The pretense of reasonable was gone. His eyes went flat and dead. He moved his hand from the wall, and, with a speed that was shocking, he grabbed my chin. He squeezed. It didn't pre, not at first. But the pressure was immense. He tilted my head up, forcing me to look at him. "You will never," he hissed, his face inches from mine, "ever use that word in this house again. You will never say her name again. You don't understand anything. You're hurting me." "Am I?" He squeezed harder. This is nothing. This is a discussion. This is a husband instructing his wife. He held me there, pinned, for 10, 20, 30 seconds. I did not struggle. I did not cry out. I only looked. I saw him. For the first time, I truly saw the monster living behind the mask. Then, just as abruptly, he let me go. He pushed me, hard, and I stumbled back, hitting the bookshelf. Books fell to the floor. "Clean that up," he said, his voice flat. He walked back to the desk. He calmly put the ledger, the bank book, and the decree back into the drawer. He locked it with the key. He then put the key in his pocket. He turned to me. I was still leaning against the shelf, my chin throbbing, my entire body shaking. "We are going to have dinner now, Virginia," he said, as if nothing had happened. "You went to a lot of trouble. It would be a frivolous waste not to eat it." I said nothing. "Go to the kitchen, put the food on the table." I couldn't move. "Go!" he roared. The sound was so sudden, so violent, it was like an explosion. I ran. I fled the study, stumbling over the books I was supposed to clean up. I ran to the kitchen, my heart about to burst from my chest. I stood there, panting, in the center of the kitchen. The chicken was cold. The potatoes were a gray paste. My perfect dinner. I heard his footsteps. He was not running. He was walking. Calmly. He appeared in the kitchen doorway. He had put his suit jacket back on. He had straightened his tie. He was the perfect, respectable husband. "Well?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "I'm waiting. Serve the dinner, Virginia." I looked at the cold, ruined food. I looked at the man in the doorway, the stranger, and I knew what I was. I was not his wife. I was his hostage. I was his alibi. I was the prop he was using to finish his destruction of Cheryl, and I was trapped. I had no money. I had no phone. I had no friends. He had chased them all away, my family. He had told me they were a bad influence. Who could I tell? Who would believe me? Run before it's too late. The phone call, my laughter, it echoed in my head. It was 3 months. 3 months to the day. And it was far, far too late. I picked up a plate, my hand shaking so hard it rattled against the counter. "Yes, Patrick," I whispered, and I began to serve him his dinner. The plate rattled in my hands as I scooped a congealed lump of mashed potatoes onto it. I added a slice of the pale, dry chicken. I did this twice, once for him, once for me. I carried the plates to the table where he was already seated, a king on his throne, waiting to be served. I placed his plate in front of him and sat down in my own chair. The silence in the room was a physical weight, thick and suffocating. I could hear the faint, high-pitched buzz of the fluorescent light in the kitchen. I could hear him pick up his knife and fork. He took a bite. He chewed, slowly, his eyes fixed on me. "It's cold," he said, as if stating a simple, unavoidable fact. "Yes," I whispered. "We can't afford to waste food, Virginia. Eat your dinner." I picked up my own fork. I couldn't swallow. The knot in my stomach, the one that had formed when he was late, had now become a stone of pure, cold dread. But I put the food in my mouth. I chewed. I swallowed. It felt like eating sawdust and ash. We ate the entire meal in this terrible, crushing silence. He ate every single bite. I forced down what I could, my throat constricting with every swallow. When he was finished, he placed his knife and fork neatly together on the empty plate. "That's better," he said. He wasn't talking about the food. He was talking about me, about my compliance. "Now, clear the dishes." I stood up on unsteady legs. I took his plate. I took my own, still half full. I carried them to the kitchen. "All of it, Virginia," he called from the table, his voice sharp. "I want this kitchen spotless before you come to bed." I did not turn around. "Yes, Patrick." I washed the dishes. I scrubbed the roasting pan, the same one I had scrubbed with angry, self-pitying tears just a few weeks before. There were no tears now. I was hollow. I was a shell. The girl who had hummed by this sink, who had felt so smug and happy, was gone. She had been murdered in the study, and a terrified ghost had taken her place. When everything was clean, I dried my hands and walked on numb feet to the bedroom. He was in bed, propped up against the pillows, reading a book, as if this were the end of any normal, unremarkable day. I got ready for bed, my movements stiff and robotic. I lay down on my side of the bed, as far from him as I could possibly get, my back to him. I lay there, rigid, for what felt like hours. I was waiting, but I didn't know for what. For him to touch me? For him to say something else? He did not. After a time, I heard him close his book, place it on the nightstand, and turn off his light. His breathing soon became deep and even. He was asleep. He was untroubled. He had shattered my world, revealed himself to be a monster, and then he had gone to sleep as easily as a child. I, on the other hand, did not sleep. I stared into the darkness of the room, and for the first time I felt a terrible, piercing kinship with the woman I had despised. Cheryl. I whispered her name in my mind. What did he do to you? How did he break you? The days that followed were a new kind of existence. The pretense of our happy, newlywed marriage was gone, but it was replaced by a far more sinister and far more public pretense. To the outside world, if the outside world had been looking, we were still the perfect couple. But inside the walls of that house, I was no longer a wife. I was an employee, a servant, and a prisoner. He was no longer charming. He was efficient. He would hand me my weekly allowance, which was now almost nothing, along with my little spiral notebook. But now it was a cruel game, a daily ritual of humiliation. "I see here you bought aspirin," he said one morning, tapping the ledger with his pen. "Are you ill? You're not ill, are you, Virginia? I can't have you being ill." "No, Patrick." "Just a headache." "Headaches come from stress, my love," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "And you have nothing to be stressed about. I'm handling everything. Perhaps you are imagining the headaches, like some other people we know." He never said her name. He didn't have to. My life became a cage of 3 rooms, the kitchen, the bedroom, and the living room. The study was, of course, forbidden. He kept the key in his pocket at all times. I knew because I watched him. I watched him pat his pocket, checking for it, a nervous, repetitive tick. My isolation, which had been a slow creep, was now a locked door. One morning I went to use the telephone to call my mother. I was desperate. I don't know what I was going to do. Scream? Ask for help? I just needed to hear a voice that wasn't his. I picked up the receiver. There was no dial tone. It was dead. "Oh dear," Patrick said from behind me. I hadn't even heard him enter the room. I jumped, dropping the receiver, which clattered loudly against the wall. "The line seems to be out," he said, his voice full of that same false sympathy. "I'm afraid I had to have it temporarily disconnected. We just can't afford the frivolous expense right now, Virginia. My investments require all our capital." He smiled at me. "You understand, don't you? It's for our future." I just stared at him. He had cut my last lifeline. The mail was next. He began to get the mail himself, walking to the end of the driveway just as the mailman arrived, greeting him with a cheerful wave. He would sort through the letters on the porch, and by the time he came inside, he would only have a few bills in his hand. "Anything for me?" I asked, just once, my voice barely a whisper. "No, darling. Who would be writing to you?" He was right. Who? He had chased all my friends away. And my mother. He was probably throwing her letters straight into the trash. The house on Elm Creek began to feel haunted, not by ghosts, but by the truth I knew. I was living in a stolen house. I was sleeping next to a thief. Every time I dusted the mantel or swept the floor, I felt complicit. I was helping him. I was his alibi, the respectable wife that proved he was a respectable man. He began to talk about the plan. He would do it at dinner. He would sit there, eating the simple, joyless food I prepared, and he would talk, often to the room, not directly to me. "It's all proceeding beautifully," he'd say. "The legalities are almost resolved. The problem is about to be liquidated." Liquidated. He was talking about Cheryl. He was talking about the foreclosure, about her financial ruin. And then he would look at me, a cold spark in his eyes. "We will be free. We will move away. Start fresh. Just you and me and our future." He was lying. I knew he was lying. I could see it in the way his eyes never truly met mine. He was promising me a future to keep me quiet, to keep me compliant. "You trust me, don't you, Virginia?" he asked one night, his head tilted. I was so tired, I was a husk. "Yes, Patrick," I whispered. "Good. Because trust is the most important thing. Without trust, well, you end up like her, alone, and with nothing." I felt in that moment a despair so profound, so complete, that it was almost a relief. I had hit the bottom. There was nowhere left to fall. I was wrong. There was further to fall. It was perhaps a week later. I had lost track of time. The days were just units of fear, each one blurring into the next. He was getting agitated, restless. He would pace the living room, his hands clasped behind his back. "It's taking too long," he muttered, not to me. "The bank is slow." And then the letter arrived. It was a registered letter. The mailman insisted on a signature. Patrick was not home. I signed for it, my hand shaking so badly I could barely form my name. It was from the bank, the big city bank. It was addressed simply to occupant. I took it to the kitchen. I was going to hide it. I was going to give it to him. I didn't know what I was going to do. I stared at the envelope. My heart was a trapped bird, beating frantically against my ribs. He was a monster. He was a thief. I was his victim. But so was Cheryl. "Run. Get out of that house." My hands were shaking, but I tore the envelope open. I'm not a bad person, but I was in a bad situation. I was drowning. The document was not for me. It was not for him. It was a notice. A final notice of foreclosure. It stated that the property at 412 Elm Creek would be seized by the bank in 48 hours, 2 days. I stood in the kitchen, the paper shaking in my hand. I should have felt terrified. I should have felt panic. Instead, I felt nothing. Just a cold, awful clarity. He had won. He had destroyed her. And he was going to leave. He would be home soon. He would see the letter. He would know it was time. I heard his car in the driveway. I did not hide the letter. I was still holding it when he walked in. He saw it. His eyes narrowed. He did not ask how I got it. He just took it from my hand. He read it, and he smiled. Not his cold smile, not his calculating smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. "It's done," he whispered. "Finally, it's done." He looked at me, and his face was giddy. He was happy. "Virginia, my dear, loyal wife, you have been so good, so quiet, so steady." He laughed. He actually laughed. "Go pack a bag," he said. "A small one. Just your necessities. We are leaving. Tonight." "Tonight?" I whispered. "But where are we going?" "To our future," he said, that giddy laugh still in his voice. I didn't move. "What about the house? The furniture?" "The bank can have it. It's not ours. It never was. It's hers. It's her debt, her ruin. We are clean. We are free." I looked at his happy, triumphant face. "What about me, Patrick?" I asked. My voice was so small I could barely hear it. His smile faded. It didn't disappear. It just changed. It became the smile I knew, the cold one. "You?" he said. "What about you? You said we. You said our future. Where are we going?" He stepped closer. He put a hand on my shoulder. It felt like a block of ice. "Virginia," he said, his voice full of a sickening, false pity. "You are not coming with me." My blood stopped. My lungs stopped. "What?" "I am going to our future. You are staying here. You are the complication." I don't understand." "Of course you don't. You're a fool. I told you that from the beginning." He took his hand off my shoulder. "You see, when the bank comes in 2 days, they will find this house. And they will find you." "Me?" "Yes, you. The hysterical new wife. Living in another woman's house, a woman who has disappeared, a house with an unpaid mortgage. What do you think they will conclude, Virginia?" I couldn't breathe. "They will conclude that you and her were in this together, that you were squatting, that you were part of her fraud. Or perhaps they will think you are Cheryl, that you have been lying to everyone." Who will they believe? The respectable husband who has been searching for his unstable wife? Or the hysterical woman he found squatting in her house? He wasn't just destroying Cheryl. He was replacing her with me. You are framing me," I whispered. "I am liquidating a problem," he said. "You served your purpose. You were my show wife. You made me look stable and trustworthy. Now you will serve your new purpose. You will be the hysterical wife. The one who ruined everything, the one I had to run from." He turned and walked toward the study. "I have to get my things," he said, not looking at me. "My ledgers, my bank books, the real ones, the ones you were too stupid to find." He unlocked the study door. "You can scream," he said, his back to me. "You can cry. You can call the police. The phone is still dead, and in 48 hours they will be coming for you. Who will you call then?" He went into the study and closed the door. I heard the click of the lock. I was alone in the kitchen. Run. Get out of that house before it's too late. Cheryl's warning. It was not a warning. It was a prophecy. I was standing in the ruins of my life, trapped in a stolen house, waiting for the bank. And the man who had done this to me was in the next room, packing his money, about to disappear forever, leaving me to take the fall. I had laughed at her. Now I was her. I stood in the kitchen, a statue carved from ice. The sound of the study door locking was a final, definitive click. It was the sound of a key turning in a cell door. He was in there, safe with his stolen money. I was out here, trapped, waiting for the ruin he had so carefully manufactured for me. I am her. The thought was not one of self-pity. It was a cold, hard fact. I was now Cheryl. I was the hysterical wife, the complication, the one left behind to take the fall. And in that moment, in that cold kitchen, something inside me broke. It was the last, thin, brittle layer of the young, foolish girl I had been. The girl who believed in charm, the girl who had laughed at another woman's pain, the girl who had wanted so desperately to be the perfect wife that she had ignored the truth. She was gone, and in her place a stranger was born, a woman who was cold, a woman who was furious. He was in the study. He was whistling. I could hear it faintly through the thick door, a cheerful, jaunty tune. He was happy. He was happy because he had won. He had defeated Cheryl, and now he had defeated me. He had told me the phone was dead. He had told me I was trapped. He believed I was a fool, a doll to be placed in his dollhouse, and now a doll to be thrown onto the fire. He lies, I thought. He lies about everything. He lied about Cheryl. He lied about the house. He lied about the money. What if he had lied about the phone? I moved. My feet, which had felt nailed to the floor, were suddenly mine again. I walked, not ran, from the kitchen, through the dining room, into the living room. I looked at the telephone sitting on the little table. It was my only link to the outside world, and he had severed it. I picked up the receiver. Silence. Dead, empty silence, just as he said. I felt the despair rise up, a black, choking wave. He had been thorough. He had won. I stood there, holding the dead receiver, and my eyes followed the cord. It ran from the phone, along the baseboard, to a small, square junction box on the wall. He was a businessman, a planner. He was not an electrician. He would have done the simplest, easiest thing. I let the receiver fall, letting it dangle on its coiled cord. I knelt by the wall. The box had a simple, flat cover. I used my fingernails, prying it open. It popped off. Inside, just as I thought. He hadn't cut the line. He was too neat for that. He had just loosened the screws. The small, colored wires were free, dangling, not touching the contacts. He was arrogant. He was lazy. He thought I was too stupid to even look. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. I was vibrating with it. I heard him in the study again, the scrape of a drawer, the cheerful, awful whistling. I looked at the wires. I looked at the screws. I didn't have tools. I ran back to the kitchen. I didn't grab a weapon. I grabbed a small, sharp paring knife. I ran back to the wall. I used the tip of the knife as a screwdriver. I scraped the wires. I pushed them back under the tiny screw heads. Red to red, green to green, I guessed. I prayed. I tightened the screws, the metal biting into the copper. I stood up. I picked up the receiver. I held it to my ear, and I heard the most beautiful sound I have ever heard in my life. A sound more beautiful than any symphony, more profound than any poem. A dial tone. He had lied. He had underestimated me. He thought I was hysterical. I was calm. I put my finger in the rotary dial. I dialed 0. I did not call my mother. I did not call a friend. A voice, female and bored, answered, "Operator." "I need the police," I said. My voice was low, shaking, but clear. "My husband is here. He has stolen a lot of money. He is planning to flee tonight. He is framing me for it. My address is 412 Elm Creek." "Ma'am?" The operator's voice was sharp now. "Are you in danger?" I heard the whistling stop. I heard the lock in the study door turn. "Yes," I whispered. "Please hurry." I hung up the phone. I turned around. Patrick was standing in the study doorway. He was not whistling. He was holding a heavy leather briefcase in one hand. His hat and coat were on. He was leaving. His face was a mask of pure, cold fury. "What did you do?" he hissed. He had heard. He had heard the last part. I backed away. What did you do, you fool? He spat the word. I called the police, I said. For a second, he didn't move. He just stared. He was computing this. He was recalculating. And then he smiled. That awful, cold smile. Did you? He said. On what phone? The dead one. You are hysterical. You've finally gone insane. He believed I was bluffing. He still thought he had won. You are just like her, he said, taking a step toward me. You make up fantasies. He started to walk toward the front door. Get your coat, Virginia, he said, his voice suddenly light. We are going on a trip. You will tell them it was all a mistake, a silly wife's hysterical prank. He was going to take me with him. He was going to make me his hostage. No, I said. He stopped. What did you say? No, I am not going with you. And in the distance, I heard it. A faint wail. A siren. His head snapped up. His smile vanished. The color drained from his face. He knew. You, he whispered. The siren was getting closer. Louder. He didn't look at me with rage. He looked at me with hatred. A pure, distilled hatred that froze my blood. He wasn't going to run to the back door. He wasn't going to fight. He was going to destroy the evidence. He was going to destroy me. He lunged, not for the door, for me. He grabbed my chin, just as he had in the study. You ruined everything, he roared. He was not the calm, cold planner. He was a wild animal. He raised his other hand, the one not holding the briefcase. And that's when the front door burst open. It splintered off its hinges. 2 policemen, big men in blue uniforms, were there. Their guns were drawn. Police! Let her go! Patrick froze. His hand was still on my face. His other hand was still raised. He was caught. At his peak of rage, at his peak of arrogance, with his briefcase full of stolen money in his hand, he was caught. He let go of me. Officer, he said, and my stomach turned as the charming, calm voice returned. Thank God you are here. My wife, she is terribly unwell. She is hysterical. She attacked me. I was just trying to calm her down. The 2 policemen looked at him. They looked at me, shaking, my chin red and already bruising, and then they looked at the briefcase in his hand, and his hat and coat. You were calming her down by getting ready to leave? One officer asked, his voice dry. I was going to take her to a hospital. Liar! I shrieked. The word just flew out of my mouth. He's a liar! He's a thief! The briefcase is full of stolen money. He was leaving. He was framing me. Ma'am, please calm down, the first officer said. See? Patrick said, with a sad, weary sigh. Hysterical. I can explain everything. This is my business paperwork. I am going on a trip. The officer looked at me. He looked at Patrick. The house, I said, my mind suddenly clear. The house isn't his. It belongs to his ex-wife, Cheryl. He stole it. He's been hiding money. Look in his study. There's a locked drawer. The real ledgers are in there. The divorce decree, the proof. He told me so himself. Patrick's face went white. The second officer looked at the first. Go look, the first one said. The second officer walked past me, past a frozen Patrick, and into the study. We stood there in silence, just the sound of the police radio crackling from the car outside. Patrick, the first officer said, why don't you put the briefcase down? It's my personal property, Patrick said, his voice tight. Put it down. Slowly, Patrick placed the briefcase on the floor. The second officer returned. He was holding the bank book I had seen, and the divorce decree, and another, thicker ledger. He looked at his partner, and he nodded. Patrick didn't say anything. He just looked at me, and if a look could kill, I would have died 1,000 times. Mr. Patrick, the officer said, you are under arrest. It was a long night, and a long month, and a long year. It turned out that Cheryl hadn't disappeared. She was living with her sister in the next state. She had been fighting him in court for months. She was not hysterical, she was exhausted. And broke. The police called her, and I finally met her. It was at the courthouse. I was there to testify. She was there to watch. I saw her sitting on a bench. I walked over. I sat down. She looked at me. I looked at her. I started. I am so sorry. You called me. You warned me. And I laughed at you. I called you pathetic. She looked at me for a long time. He has a way of making you hate other women, she said, her voice tired. He makes you think you're the special one, the smart one, the calm one. Yes, I whispered. I am just glad you were smarter than me, she said. I just ran. You fought. I didn't know what else to do, I said. We sat in silence for a moment. He won't hurt anyone else, she said. And she was right. Patrick was convicted of fraud, of embezzlement from his own company, of theft, of so many things. The real ledgers I told the police about were his undoing. He was sentenced to decades in prison. His charm didn't work on the judge. He lost everything. The stolen money was seized. The house was returned to Cheryl. He lost his reputation. He lost his freedom. He suffered his consequences. And me? I left that town. I had nothing, not a penny, not a friend left. I was the scandal, the thief's wife. I got a job in a diner, washing dishes. I lived in a tiny room above a bakery, and I was happy. I was free. I was no longer hysterical. I was no longer a fool. I was Virginia. I rebuilt my life. Brick by brick. It was hard. It was lonely. But it was mine. I went back to school. I became a librarian. I found joy in the quiet of the books. I found peace. I never married again. I learned to be my own solid ground. And now, as an 81-year-old woman, when I look back at that 21-year-old girl who laughed on the phone, I don't feel anger. I feel pity. And I feel pride. Because she was a fool. But oh, my dear, she learned. Thank you for listening to me today, for allowing me to share with you this intimate chapter of my life. If my story has touched you, please don't hesitate to leave a like on this video and subscribe to this channel to discover other testimonies like mine. And please share it, because who knows, maybe someone going through a similar trial right now will find the courage to keep searching, to hope, to believe in the impossible. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Thank you from the bottom of me heart for listening to me.